This sitting is resumed. Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and my colleagues. I rise, Mr. Speaker, to join this debate of the resolution laid in Parliament that take note and approval of this Charter of Barbados 2021. And I want to join with all the speakers that went before me that agreed that Barbados is at a delicate position, the state of affairs of our country. Having gone through several issues from ashfall, still battling COVID-19. But most importantly, having the move to Republican status that will signal the removal of all the constitutional shackles from our identity as a people. It seeks to reshape our identity as a people. That's what this charter is about, and us moving to Republican status. We therefore have a right as a people now to celebrate our freedom from the imperialist position that was once imposed upon us. And we know, coming from Coffee to Bossa to Clement Payne, then to independence. Prior to independence, we recognize the British royal family presided over the enslavement of our people. And we know very well that the Great Rebellion by Bossa that was held on Easter Sunday back in some 205 years ago, back in 1816, where 400 men and women rebelled. Rebellion started on the Easter Sunday, that was the 14th of April, and the real war started on the 16th, the battle. And that was a battle to free our people from being enslaved and from the British rule. And it puzzled me at this stage, Mr. Speaker, why some people will be pondering and criticizing why we have taken this step. And it's not a bold step. It is a step that we started back in 1966. And it is a step that speaks to the ideology of governing a nation as a republic with an emphasis on liberty and civic virtues practiced by our citizens. And this is about our people. And I just want to say on behalf of the people of St. George South and on behalf of the wider Barbados, in support of the Cabinet of Barbados and my parliamentary colleagues, that we support this move to republic. Should have been done ever since. There are questions raised whether there was consultation. But what is the common thread in this country is that all citizens support the move to republic. And we can differ in not how it was done, but the timing some people are questioning. Some people are questioning consultation, but no one is questioning the move to Republican status. And I think that is fundamental as a government. We saw it fit that this was important to us within our third year in office, and the work started prior to ensure that we free ourselves from those shackles that I spoke about, those constitutional shackles for our identity as a people. But I want to go into St. George South a bit. Most of my colleagues, member for St. Peter, spoke eloquently. He was pellucidly clear as a man of the cloth on the various aspects of Christianity. Then the member for Christchurch East, who just dissected the law surrounding the justiciability of this charter. Well, the charter is not justiciable, sorry. It is not enshrined in law. But at the end of the day, we recognize that the Constitution of Barbados will come after we have created our charter. Now, why I want to go into St. George? Because I am from an area that is populated with many churches, all of the Christian origins. And I will dive right into my value system, how I was brought up. And I'll go back to my grandparents. My grandfather was the co-founder of the Ellerton Gospel Hall, Niles Road, Ellerton, St. George. My grandmother was an evangelist and practiced the Christian faith at Farm Road Pentecostal Church. Directly opposite my home was the Pilgrim Holiness Church, which I came up in. It's now the Wesleyan Holiness Church. And I had to go to church, morning Sunday school at Ellerton Wesleyan. I came out of Ellerton Wesleyan and Granny was waiting to go to Farm Road Pentecostal. And then I came back home midday to eat lunch, and then we had to go to 5 o'clock Sunday school at the Ellerton Gospel Hall with grandfather. Then we came back home and Granny again, hustling back to Farm Road, 7 o'clock night service. And there were the 3 Sutherland boys, well 2. One came 5 years after. But the 2 Sutherland boys going to church 4 times a day. But why I'm going there? Because if this charter, if anything in this charter can change my fundamental value system and beliefs as a Christian, then I will not sign on to this charter. And I have not seen anything in this charter to change my fundamental belief of what shaped my value system. I'm going to stay in St. George, but I want you to know I entered public life, well, as a minister of small business, entrepreneurship, and commerce in 2018. And some may not know, but every single meeting that I presided over and I had a hand in, whether as the chairman or sitting with my colleagues, and I call all them colleagues the civil servants, they are my colleagues, I'm just the minister, but they have a permanent secretary and they have other officers, they are my colleagues. I ask that a prayer be said when we take those chairs and we sit, that a prayer be said, and ask God for guidance through the deliberations that we were engaging in at the time. And I moved from the Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship, and Commerce. And I'm now with the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Community Empowerment. The same thing occurs on a weekly basis. Every time I have a meeting, I ask that we invoke God's presence in our meeting, because we have to recognize as a people that there's a supreme being, there's a creator, there's a God, and that we cannot do it on our own. So I rise only for 10 or 15 minutes to say to people that if there's anything in this charter that will stop me from believing in the Christian faith, or that will stop me from walking into Ellerton Wesleyan Holiness or Ellerton Gospel Hall or Waverly Court Church of God, or Bethel Pentecostal in Drexel, with my head not being held high, then I have a difficulty with this charter. But I am confident and I feel comfortable that I can enter the consecrated house. Any of the 42 churches, whether it is Melverton Christian Mission, it is Mount Hill Nazarene, it's Greens Church of God, that I can sit and I can feel comfortable and not be a hypocrite, that I have signed on to something that will not change my value system or my belief in Christianity. So I say to my people in St. George, you have nothing to fear with this charter. This is a charter we the people of Barbados, and I will repeat the opening paragraph. In the 55th year of our constitutional independence, reaffirming our commitment to the fundamental rights and freedom won by those who came before us, vow to safeguard these achievements for all Barbadians and make the solemn pledge in this charter of Barbados. You know, I opened the newspaper today as well, and I saw this article. I don't like to criticize or get into faith-based and criticize the church. But what took me to the article was the Psalm 33:12. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. This is a good scripture. But some of my colleagues took me back to the Old Testament. Remember, for St. Joseph was the first person who took us back to the Old Testament. Ecclesiastes 12, his father was a pastor, and I know he knows it well. We all came up in the church, so we are Christians. We have nothing to fear. We can sign this charter. I wish we had it to sign just like the covenant of hope. We can sign it. Ecclesiastes 12 verse 1. Member for St. James Central did an excellent job as well. But I ain't going certain places today because my time is limited. But I'm Ecclesiastes 12 verse 1. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth. The word creator with a capital C. Check all the translation. The New King James Version, you can check all of them. But that scripture chronicled the ministries of the prophets and apostles. Many of the leaders, it was saying that many of the leaders knew God from their youth. They knew God from their youth. Look at the translation. It speaks to the apostles and the ministries of the prophets and apostles knowing God from their youth. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth. So I say to my family in St. George South, my church family, I'm a regular to the churches, that you have nothing to fear in this charter. We recognize God and we recognize a Creator. And whether it is 76% of the population that is Christian, and then the other minority, 24% or 20%, are not Christians, we as a government, we have a duty, similar to this charter, speaks to a duty of care to our citizens. We have a duty of care to the other faith-based organizations that are not Christians. And I proudly stand here. Those of you who know the Sutherland family from Everton St. George, the late Stephen Llewellyn Sutherland and the late Justine Sutherland, can speak to them, can speak about them, and know that they traverse not only St. George, St. Joseph Christ Church, to churches, and they preach the word of God as Christians. And that is how I was brought up. In the faith, in the belief that there's a God. And this charter has not diverted from those beliefs. All it has done is embrace those other faith-based organizations. I see nothing wrong with that. I see nothing wrong with that. But I wish to use the said verse, remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, Ecclesiastes 12 verse 1, as the minister of youth, to speak briefly on the youth. As we contemplate our future, it is clear, Mr. Speaker, members of this chamber, and Barbados, it is clear as we contemplate our future that our young people must be at the center of rebuilding our nation. It is clear that our young people must be at the center of rebuilding our nation. They must be the new drivers of our transformation. And it is our duty to provide them with the tools and skills necessary to elevate Barbados to the next level. We must understand that this charter, and I will read from Article 2 under the subheading, Equitable Development. We commit to building a progressive and cohesive society through the empowerment and full engagement of our youth and communities in the pursuit of personal excellence and the social and economic development of Barbados. So remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth. So I have married the two, the Creator and the youth. Because we have to prepare Barbados for 50 years down the road. And this charter gives us the opportunity as a government to create the policy space, create this policy space that our young people can indeed flourish and that our young people can be part of the socio-economic development landscape of this country. We intend to lift Barbados' ranking to probably the top 10 in the Global Youth Development Index. This charter speaks to youth development and redefining Barbados and who we are as a people. We must focus now and create this policy space for our young people to contribute to work opportunities. We recognize that COVID has changed the concept of work and the type of work. We are moving now from a labor force to a design workforce and not a labor force. And when I say a design workforce, this speaks to innovation and creativity. That is what it speaks to. So we need to contribute to the creation of viable youth businesses annually. But other than job opportunities and development, we have to recognize that our young people are digital natives. And we have to utilize technology to truly transform the landscape. To our young people, they have the skills and the aptitude, the techniques, the capacity to transform this place and make Barbados the best place to live, work, raise a family, and do business. And like I often say, a place of good vibes. So while some pundits are hung up on the word creator with a capital C and not the common C, while some pundits are hung up on sexuality issues, this charter speaks to a transformation agenda and a transformation charter to position Barbados after being enslaved for so many years, and where our people never had opportunities. And I heard the Prime Minister spoke about the right to vote. Women not being able to vote. Then working class people were able to acquire land at 10 cents a square foot. So we started this liberation process, and we have seen it fit to bring it to some reality and create the full action to make Barbados a republic. I had planned to speak for 15 minutes, but I want to say to you, without spending much longer on my feet, as we transition to Republican status, we need to be aware of our nationality, identity, and embrace pride in our culture. And if we as a people do not know who we are, then we tend to adopt other cultures and lose the essence of what it means to be Barbadian. And this charter speaks to what it means to be Barbadian. And Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to intervene in this debate essentially to, of course, express my support for this resolution, which is an extremely innovative way to set out the aspirations and the ideals of our fellow citizens as we transition after 55 years of independence into republic status. The underlying theme that runs through this charter is that all Barbadians are equal, as we of course know, and are entitled to justice and fairness, and to be treated on an equitable basis with respect and with common humanity and civility. And no one in their right mind can object to any of those aspirations set out in those concepts. The document also speaks to Barbados' relationships with other countries, and we've heard today from honourable members of Cabinet that that was added on by Cabinet. I fully support that. I mean, we are part of a Caribbean region bound by it historically, and in terms of culture, in terms of race, and every aspect of it. And now more than ever, really and truly, we need to further our association with Caribbean countries within our CARICOM movement and in other organizations of which we share common membership. We know that previous prime ministers, heads of government, from the Right Excellent Sir Grantley right down to the Right Excellent Errol Barrow, down to the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, and now to Honourable Prime Minister, have sought to bring the Caribbean, and through their leadership, closer together. And in an era of COVID and going forward, we need to come together more as a Caribbean nation, and this document expresses that idea. I'm happy, sir, as well to associate myself with the issue of South-South cooperation. This is a concept which is not as present today as it used to be. 30 years ago, you used to hear more about South-South. In fact, I used to subscribe at that time to South-South magazine, which used to speak to relationships, increasing relationships, and closer associations between third world and developing countries, which largely reside in the southern part of the hemisphere. One of the problems, of course, is the difficulty of travel between these countries. I mean, in many cases, as we know, you have to travel to the United States, then to come back down into South America or Latin America, or go to UK, then to go to African countries. And it is something clearly that we have to look to developing, to improving, and which I know that our country is seeking to achieve. I mean, I think the time for talking about it has gone, and we need to accept the challenge of bringing the countries in the southern part of this world, the southern hemisphere, closer together. So I'm happy to associate myself as part of this Parliament with that aspect of the Charter as well. But to continue, Mr. Speaker, from where the Honourable Member for St. George South just left off in terms of our youth, I mean, it is a cliche now, long time, that our youth is our future. And the document speaks towards advancing our youth. So we have the ideas, we now have to put meat on them. And clearly one of the challenges which we face as a nation is the aspect of many youth, many young people having left school in this country without skills, without probably the academic qualifications, the CXCs, being able to enter the world of work, the world of life. And I think it is not only the duty of government or members of this Parliament, but of all of us to make life better for them, to give them a better chance to succeed in this world. And clearly, I mean, I'm glad to be told that the Alma Parish School will be opening up again soon for those who may not be as academic as others, but we have to give our young people greater opportunities at skill training. Right now, of course, we have skills training boards, vocational training boards, and regularly, certainly up to the time of COVID, about 300 people would apply for 20 or so spaces in these institutions. When I first became a member of Parliament, and I went around to various government departments. One of the ones I went to in the first 2 months of my coming into this Parliament would have been the skills training, and was a bit disappointed with the opportunities that are offered there for our constituents. We have to get real about this. Maybe acquire a whole plantation, buildings, for example, where many young people who don't have the skills, having left school after 12 years free education, or having left school without certification, can now have the opportunity to go and get some concrete skills. We have, of course, the Youth Corps. Yes, tremendous initiative by this government again, regrettably set back to some degree by COVID and obviously the principles of social distancing having curtailed the whole program. We have the Defense Force youth programs, which have been under pressure too within the last 20 or so months. But I think we have a prime responsibility to our youth to give them a second chance and to create opportunities for them to acquire skills. Plumbers, masons, electricians, other aspects of vocational training. I'm sure that there are many plumbers in this country who make more money than lawyers. That is a fact. And we have to encourage our people to get into this. I know that I think, unfortunately, to some degree, some of our educational system within the last 30, 40 years may have been geared towards tourism and service economy. I mean, one constituent of mine, a young lady, 30-odd years of age, who works in the tourist industry and was having issues told me, at school, Ms. Dixon, they taught us to be able to go into the hospitality sector. We have to move away from that, as COVID has shown, and give our young people a greater chance. This also ties in, and correlated with this would therefore be reform of our educational system, which has served us reasonably well in the past, but now clearly has become outdated to some extent. I like what I'm hearing from the new Chief Education Officer. Pretty impressed with her, and I know, of course, there is a committee looking at curriculum reform, and I really and truly look forward to that report and to reform of our curriculum, because we have to create a young person within our school environment, our educational system, who is able to think critically, who is able to teamwork, who is able to resolve problems and issues and conflict, and be prepared for the world of adulthood and the world of work, which we are probably failing to do and to achieve with many of our young people. And our educational system, which, as we know, on independence was inherited from our colonial power, our colonial ruler England at that time, clearly has outlived its usefulness and needs to be refined and reformed to serve this barbarian society as we embark on our Republican status. The document speaks towards persons with disabilities under the section dealing with with respect. We affirm our single greatest responsibility of one to another is to safeguard and protect the dignity of our common humanity, including towards persons with disabilities. And so I've spoken many times in this Parliament and many times before I entered this Parliament on the need to create an environment where people with disabilities have as equal a chance as anybody else to achieve their full talents and their full potential. This can only come, sir, through affirmative action and legislation for people with disabilities, giving them rights and privileges which they, to a large degree in reality, do not have right now. I mean, we speak many times about the fact that we have had free education, quote unquote, in this country, enshrined in law since, I think it is December 1961, or certainly by 1962, but that in reality that is not so for many people with disabilities. And it could only be resolved, as I said, by disabilities legislation, which goes towards the full gamut of the inclusion. And of course the word inclusion runs throughout the thread of this document, but which seeks towards the inclusion of people with disabilities, both young and not so young, in all aspects of this society. I know, sir, that for that to happen, you would need consultation with the stakeholder organizations serving people with disabilities, but let us start that process. I know we've been set back and have had to concentrate a lot on managing COVID, sir, within the last 21 months, and this government has done a commendable job in so doing, in spite of course, the rise in numbers of which we are all concerned with over the last 3 months. And but for COVID, sir, I think that we would have been much further advanced after 3.5 years in office than we are now. But that's the reality, and there's nothing that we could have done about it, the advent of COVID. But certainly we owe it to people with disabilities as one of the most vulnerable groups, sectors, categories of persons in our society, to give them a better deal. And we have to start looking at how we can do this. The document also speaks towards social security and creating a platform for better protection of the most vulnerable in society. So whatever we do, there will be people, and largely, yes, single women with children, that has been mentioned in Parliament by today, who need welfare, who need social protection. And yes, sir, again, that aspect of our government, the welfare system, has been under tremendous pressure over the last 21 months. What with so many people, tens of thousands being laid off from work, they have no income in their household. We have, yes, sought to buttress that by the $600 grant to households which didn't have any income. We've sought to widen the network of provision of welfare for more persons, but there are, and I suppose inevitably, persons who have fallen through the crack, who need that assistance from the welfare department, including 5 victims, sir, who, in my constituency, who haven't been able to access welfare, who are getting the runaround. And you know, again, I know that we have welfare reform on our table, but we have to find a way in the interim to be able to ensure that persons who deservedly need welfare don't fall through the cracks. Like in everything else, sir, there have been people in this country, our constituents, some of them, who have sought to defraud the system, you know, who get in both welfare and the $600 grant. I'm sure all of us can speak towards people in our constituencies who we know have been able to do that, and that is fraud. And when I find out, I tell them, listen to me, you're doing wrong, because when you do that, somebody who deserves some income from government through welfare, through the Ministry of People Empowerment, is not getting, and it's not fair. And part of this new society, this just society, this equitable nation that we have to strive to aspire to, has to be fairness and honesty by our people, not to be trying to be smart, not to be trying to be selfish and to get everything for yourselves. And I really call on those who know that they are defrauding the system, those who are working but still getting a $600 a month grant from the Ministry of People Empowerment, to stop it, because you're not being fair to your fellow person. The document speaks towards protection of the built and natural and marine environment, under environment and sustainable development and resilience, and tied into that, sir, beach access. We pledge to protect the free and unrestricted access to all our beaches and public spaces, which is an inalienable right of every Barbadian. So one thing that I think virtually every Barbadian or every Barbadian agrees to say is that the beach belongs to me. Of course, there is a classic song by, and I'm not calling his name in a bad way, the Honourable Anthony Carter, better known as the Mighty Gabby, who holds one of the highest honours bestowed on citizens of this country, that is enshrined historically on this issue. And I represent a constituency, sir, of which this has been an issue for the last 50 odd years. Access to the beach by people who's born in the district, which encompasses the beach, and now find that their access to the beach is being denied, if not denied, being made difficult to. So people vote in general elections on this issue. This is one of the litmus tests along the West Coast, from Black Rock right down to Speightstown. And that encompasses the whole of my constituency on the coast. And there has to be a way, sir, whereby people within the communities, people who have an inalienable right and who born the navel strings buried on the beach literally, have a say in this issue. They cannot be denied access to the beach. They cannot be hindered in their access to the beach, whether it's morning, noon, or night. And we have agencies that regulate the building of property on the coast, on the beach, and they have to be more watchful and more transparent and accountable to the people who consider it rightly their birthright to access the beach. Like I said, I was appalled that early last year in Western that beach access was cut off and permission given by government authorities. And I was in cabinet then. Not only that, but obviously the MP and the minister in charge of maritime affairs was not informed either. But this can't continue in this country. Recently, we know that the Honourable member for St. James Central 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago spoke about it within his constituency and spoke of it in very, very strong language. And it is something that West Coast members of Parliament have to be concerned about. I was in the garden, St. James, on Saturday afternoon, and as usual, it was mentioned to be, but Mr. Inkson, you know, it's becoming more and more difficult for us to access the beach down here. So I am calling, sir, on those with responsibility, whether it's in town planning, whether it's in coastal, to be mindful of this issue. The people have to be involved. As far as I'm concerned, the people within a district should be written, should have the opportunity to attend town hall meetings before development starts. This does not happen, as I understand it, and I would have met recently with the Honourable member for St. Michael South Central and Coastal and Town Planning on this issue. As I understand it, they leave it to the property, it is left to the property developer to inform the residents in the district. And that can't work. A government or government authorities have the duty, in my submission, to inform. Can't leave it to the property developer, or can't leave it to the property developer to give notice as to when they're going to start the development or when they're going to do something that hinders access to the beach, whether temporarily or on a permanent basis, to do repairs to the property or whatever. The property developer not going to do that. So to tell me that there are conditions to it is really and truly meaningless if there is no government intervention to ensure that this is done. And the only way that can be done is if government takes on the responsibility for so informing and being there and involving the people within the districts at every level. If not, there's going to be lack of transparency, lack of accountability. You're going to hear that the local MP, politician involved in this conspiracy. And that is certainly not the case in my case or in my fellow West Coast members of Parliament's case in this Parliament. It's also the case, sir, and I first wish, as I said, to commend the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South Central, who 2 Sundays ago came with me down to Roadview with members of the Coastal Department and Town Planning to look at a situation where there are 4 properties, essentially 4 properties that have been adversely affected because of works by multi-million-dollar properties further up the road to the north. In Roadview, they have suffered adversely, and there are reports on this. So this is not me speaking out of my head. Reports that have said that these 4 properties have suffered along the coast as they adjoin the beach because of developmental works allowed by multi-million-dollar properties in the vicinity and allowed by government authorities. In fact, it was accepted by the Coastal Department that in the case of one, they were wrong to allow particular work to be done, because the water then, obviously, as we know, has to find a course and comes downstream and affects properties. And I'm calling on the Coastal Department, and I told the Honourable Member, the Minister for Maritime Affairs, I thank you for coming with me, but I'm going to speak about it at the first opportunity in Parliament. I'm calling on Coastal Department to act and to protect these properties as has been pleaded by the residents. And as I said, there are studies about it. As I understand it, the government is hoping to access an international loan which will be used partly to do some developmental work in this area in 2 years' time, but that may be too late. It is better for the government to be able to spend a few tens of thousands of dollars to protect these properties than to be possibly liable in law down the road because you granted permission for some rich people further up the road to do work that has affected these properties. This is part of what we are trying to achieve in this charter: fairness and equity for our people. And that is why in the charter we commit to the protection of our land, air, and marine environment. And that means protection of people's individual properties where there has been undermining of those properties because of development which has been approved by government departments. The document speaks towards access to information. Under democracy, we shall promote the right of access to information and the right to freedom of communication and expression. And I spoke about it, sir, recently in a debate, and I again call for freedom of information legislation. I think that is under the Ministry of Information, but we need that. Again, look, we are not a government that has anything to hide. But by hindering access to information where there is no legislative right by or of the citizen to access government information through government files, of course, barring information which is detrimental to national security, of course, that would be excluded. We need to pass freedom of information legislation. And I always say, and you, Mr. Speaker, would know very well, that in Jamaica, Dudas Court was only caught because they had freedom of information legislation. And when the press called for information which was in the purview of the government had 60 days, I think it was, under their legislation, freedom of information legislation, to disclose that information. And that was the start of the downfall of Dudas Cork and his extradition then to United States in jail. And these kind of legislative and policy initiatives by a government enhances the governance of a society. Just like modern day prevention of corruption legislation, just like modern day integrity in public life legislation. It is something that we have to have as we go forward into a new republic. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to speak to the issue of reparations, because towards a just society section in our charter speaks towards commitment to working in good faith to heal the wounds inflicted on our people through centuries of enslavement, racism, and oppression, in order to reconcile the fractures such inhumanity produced, and to seek reparatory justice and the economic enfranchisement of the systematically oppressed. Something, sir, I totally agree with, and I join hands with the Honourable Prime Minister, with my colleague, the Honourable Member for St. Michael East, in calling for the developed world to grant reparatory justice to our country and to our fellow CARICOM countries. They owe it to us, sir. We went through 300 years before, almost 300 years, before slavery, sir, 200 and a lot years, before the abolition of slavery, in 1834, of the greatest crime against humanity. Such a great crime, sir, that in fact our ancestors, the ancestors of every single person who comprises this parliament, were deemed to be non-humans, sir. Not humans. That was it. And the European countries, including Great Britain, of which we are transitioning from their head of state being our head of state next week, has continuously denied responsibility for the inhumane treatment of our ancestors. They had the opportunity, sir, as recently as 2007, on the 200th anniversary of the abolition of the slave trade, when they debated in the British Parliament this issue. And surrounding that, of course, was the Durban Conference on reparations in South Africa, which Barbados played a prominent role. And the British government continuously refuses to apologize to us for the injustices, for the inhumane treatment. I mean, it is indescribable that they put our ancestors through. Now, the British state and the royal family, sir, has apologized in 1997 for its role in the potato famine in the 19th century island. They have apologized to the Indian people for the British massacre of about 1,200 people at Amritsar in the Punjab in 1919, but refused to apologize for the, I think it's 15 million slaves.
You want to remember has 2 more minutes.
Yes, sir. That they transported as part of the triangle from Africa to the Caribbean. That is not right. They justify it by saying that it was legal at the time, and therefore, even though it was something that was wrong, it was legal, and therefore they should not have to give any compensation or reparations. Now, in fact, sir, in 2004, a team of financial experts and lawyers and actuaries and historians calculated that if the United Kingdom were to pay for the 2 million slaves in the Caribbean at a wage at the lowest level of an English worker in the 18th and 19th centuries, plus damages for trauma and for loss of assets, Britain would pay 7.5 trillion pounds to the Caribbean. 7.5 trillion pounds. That is what those experts calculated Britain got out of our ancestors as slaves, free slave labor. We know that, in fact, Barbados, as has been said earlier today, was the standard form slave country on how to treat slaves and to get the most out of them for the enrichment of England. The 1661 Slave Code, which was passed by this Parliament, sir, was used as the model piece of legislation throughout the world, not only in other British colonies, but by colonies of other European colonizers as well, on how to legislate to control and manage your slaves and your slave society. But the reality of it, sir, is that Great Britain, and indeed all of Europe, is as wealthy as it is because of the profits made from slavery in Barbados and in other Caribbean countries. That is a fact. The British state, the royal family, were direct investors in slavery and in the slave society. They controlled the ships, invested in the ships. They controlled the insurance on the slaves and the ships, the banking industry. And all of this is the reason why these countries are so wealthy and why the British monarchy itself is so wealthy. And therefore, you know, I would trust, sir, that when, of course, Prince Charles comes down next week, that this would be again reiterated to him, as I'm sure it has been reiterated to the British Crown already, that we need compensation. It doesn't have to be money, sir. We don't expect $9.7 trillion pounds to be transferred to our Caribbean countries. But we need some compensation for our education, because the fact is that our education could be better if but for slavery. We have had, in many cases...
Member wind up, please?
Yes, sir, I am. Dysfunctional families because of how we were treated during slavery. We have a situation, sir, where 60% of Barbadians over the age of 50 suffer from hypertension or diabetes or both as a direct result of the trauma experienced by our ancestors during slavery. So we need some compensation, not only in terms of help for our education system, but for our health system. And yes, there are individual universities that have given money. I think, subject to correction, I believe the University of Glasgow or another university has committed £20 million towards reparations for Caribbean people through the University of the West Indies. But we need a systematic policy by our former colonizers to give recompense to our people. So, sir, this is an extremely innovative document, subject to correction, but I believe it is the first of its kind in the Caribbean, not tied in with the Constitution. Yes, you won't be able to enforce the aspirations under it in court, but it is certainly something which we aspire to, sir. And I know Canada did it when I was a student there. They would have repatriated their constitution from England, formulated a charter of rights for its citizens, and this is in similar vein, and I fully support this resolution here today. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't intend to belabor the House at this late hour, but just to say a few words in support of the resolution before us. And I want to locate my conversation, of course, to Article 4, which deals with the environmental sustainability and the development and resilience of our people. And Mr. Speaker, I first want to exercise my vocal cords today to speak about the 5 planks of sustainable development. Because the reality is, if you are talking about equality, if you are talking about persons having the rights, equal rights, and justice, because environmental development, protection and resilience is equal to environmental justice, and there must be environmental justice for one and all under a Barbados Labour Party government headed by the Prime Minister of this country. And I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, the 5 planks or tenets that I will speak about is peace. In every single community, there must be peace as it relates to how persons treat one another, respecting their rights, respecting, of course, their cultures, respecting, of course, their religion. There must be prosperity, where every single Barbadian feels that they have to not only have an intangible state in terms of the Barbadian dream or the Bajan dream, but they must have a tangible state as well to achieve something under the sun. There, of course, must be partnerships, an important cog. Partnerships with government, partnerships with institutions, partnerships with communities. And of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, there must be the planet. And the planet speaks to the environment around them. Every single thing that we do as it relates to resilience, mitigation, meditation, we are speaking about, and I heard the Member of Parliament of St. James Central spoke eloquently about the existential threat, the one that was on every single Barbadian, every single human being lips, probably animals too, before the COVID-19 as we know it, the existential threat known as climate change. And Mr. Speaker, sir, in order to have all these planks working together, we must have respect for one another. We must have inclusivity. What the Member of Parliament for St. James Central didn't say is that he was able to deliver in this country, for the first time in history, an homage being paid on him and his stewardship as it relates to Barbados being the most inclusive touristic destination in the Western Hemisphere for the first time in the history. Because we understand and respect the rights of individuals, every single person that came to our shores, and by extension, every Barbadian. And that is the type of people that we are known across the globe to be. But, Mr. Speaker, I also want to reflect on the first verse of a song by one of my musical idols, Luther Vandross, when he said in his first verse, a chair is just a chair, even when there's no one sitting there. And a house is not a home when there's no one there to hold you tight and to kiss you goodnight. What I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, that a house must be a home. And the only way we can have a home is if there is love, there is peace, there's tranquility, there's prosperity, and that there are persons in that home who respect their environment and their surroundings. So, this song is that for the type of conversation we need to have in this country. And I want the minister, my good friend, the minister responsible for housing, to understand that he is not only responsible for providing houses in this country, but providing in a fair and just Barbados, providing a home where Barbadians can feel love, they can feel respected, they can feel a sense of ownership. In other words, they must have a tangible state and what is going on around them. And I'm saying that to say this, Mr. Speaker, that the only way they can have this tranquil environment, this recreational space, the only way they can dream the Barbadian dream, and that's what this charter is about, dreaming the Barbadian dream, is if, Mr. Speaker, those same persons are allowed to enjoy their environment free of environmental pollution. And I don't care, Mr. Speaker, today, who is responsible for that pollution, but persons in communities must be able to enjoy the tranquility of their environments. And that is what is referred to as environmental justice. Justice means that we must close the disparity between those up there and those down there. The disparities. And the disparities exist in impoverished communities, where we have some persons who, because of their flippant or churlish behavior, cares absolutely nothing about people in their surroundings and their environment, and they intend to do business in. I am saying that the laws must be respected in this country, that people's rights must be respected, and that we must understand that when you are exercising your right in the environment, that you must have a sense of understanding the purpose that you are serving, and there must be a relationship between you and that environment when you seek to operate business, which means that the noise that you create must not affect persons within the community. Thus, that you create must not affect persons within the community. And that there must be respect so that every person can operate in a symbiotic way where there's benefits across the board. That is what I'm saying. It is called environmental justice. And Mr. Speaker, you of all people know the importance of that, justice, environmental justice. And that is why we have moved apace to have at the Solicitor General's office legislation that speaks to how we treat the disused land. Because if you're talking about a fair Barbados and an environment where every single person can enjoy the tranquility, we have a song called Beautiful Barbados, an idyllic song by an iconic group. The only way we can have a beautiful and just society is that if persons who have disused property, land, I don't believe in idle land because they say that that is a word used by idle people, man. No idle land here. In Barbados, if you have land and you're saying that you are a landowner, as the minister responsible for the environment, the warning has gone out already to those persons. Because we are saying that you must be able to keep your land in a pristine state. We are saying that your property must not affect persons in the immediate surroundings. It must not be a haven for rodents, vermin, or any of the other ills. It must not be a nuisance. It must not provide a haven for vagrants or whatever. Because an old lady in St. Philip told me, and it's St. Philip South, by the way, that every tree could be a man, but every man can be a tree. And I believe in that axiom. I really believe in it because in the bush, that is where women are raped. In the bush, densely populated, that is where persons are robbed. And all types of nefarious activities happen in the bush. So I'm saying today that it is common sense. It's common sense. When I speak to legislation that will ensure that landowners, persons who live in one part of Barbados, north, south, may not be west because the wise men come from it, but not east, the wise men come from the east. But persons who live in Barbados, in certain areas, must understand that although they live far away from the areas that they own in terms of the land, that they must have a duty and a responsibility, if you're talking environmental justice, to be able to take care of that property that is affecting persons in the immediate environs. They must be able to, if they understand and respect people. And if you are talking about respect across the board, this is the type of respect that can build communities. They have incidents where persons live in St. Andrew, got online in Christchurch. Of course, I would speak specifically about the epicenter. Own land in Christchurch and refuse because it's not in eyesight. It is not an eyesore. The mosquitoes don't help bug them at night and their children. The rats don't run out and bite them at the bottom of their feet. It depicts all types of arthritis, maybe gouty arthritis or what's not. But what I'm saying is that it does not affect them immediately. So out of sight, out of mind. The time for that, Mr. Speaker, is over. There must be a new form of environmental justice where we are asking Barbadians to have a level of altruism, have a level of respect for one another, and be able to take care of their properties. I'm saying this, I am pleading to Barbadians because this is a big problem, a major problem for my ministry. But as I said, legislation is at the level of the Attorney General. And we will do whatever we have to do as a government. In the same way we said, that's a government, we are bringing a charter that will respect the lives, the will, and the opinions and desire of every single Barbadian. Everybody that will like what I speak about, when I talk about the protection of the leaf-toll gecko, some may cringe when I talk about the polywalls that we don't see run about in Barbados anymore. But I understand the polywall. I understand the importance of biodiversity. I understand the importance of these things. And I understand how they are able to protect our environment, that which we live in. So we must be able to respect every person, every person's view. I understand when Carla and all the other persons who are responsible for the Turtle Project, when they are out at night saving that which will help to preserve our reefs and give fertility to the reefs. I understand the importance of that. A lot of Barbadians may not think that it is a worthy exercise, but it will protect the very environment where we are asking the rest of the world to join us as we seek to rebuild our blue economy. That is what I'm speaking about. If we do not respect the rights of persons in a holistic environment, then the fight that we are fighting, when we ask persons to join with us to build forward better, the fight we are fighting in terms of mitigation, the fight we are fighting in terms of adaptation against the vagaries of climate change, that fight will be lost. And then we go a little further, because there must be environmental protection legislation, and that will be coming soon. I am not saying so because the province is a comfort for food. I mean, we have smart people in Barbados. But I am saying so because I understand the importance of having that protection for the environment, because based on what we are seeing lately, now more than ever, we need to protect our environment, and at the same time, we are asking Barbadians to stop the anthropogenic behaviors, those behaviors that see the old fridges going in the gullies and destroying our ecosystem. We have made a commitment through the United Nations and the General Assembly's call to have a decade of ecosystem restoration. And the only way we can have ecosystem restoration, the only way we can preserve our biodiversity, the only way we can speak to all those things that we have paid tribute to and we are signatory to, is if we at home do the right thing. I said before, there's never the wrong time to do the right thing. This is the time to do the right thing. And this charter lends itself for us to be able to do the right thing. I am pleading with Barbadians to take care of their immediate surrounding. Stop the illegal littering and dumping that we have in the gullies and stop destroying our ecosystems. If you are talking about environmental justice, if you are talking about protecting the environment, if you are talking about all those things that makes us Barbadians, and if you are talking about republic and a paradigm which sees ourselves as the best people in the Western Hemisphere, the leaders as it relates to climate change, the leaders as it relates to the protection of our environment. If you talk about beautiful Barbados by an iconic group, you can't have all those things being said in one voice, and down deep in your vocal cords, you're saying something else or doing something else different. That is not environmental justice. That is not sustainable development. And I'm saying, as if we are serious about these things, we have to come together and start protecting our environment, because that will not only save the lives of this generation, but it will save the lives of the unborn child. And that is what this charter seeks to protect. In a diverse environment, I often speak about biological diversity. And I can't be speaking about biological diversity if I don't understand that there is also going to be a diversity of opinions. There's going to be a diversity of behavior, a diversity of cultures, a diversity of religious practices. Now, how can you be telling the rest of the world that you understand that there's going to be a difference in the society, because that is what makes society? We have 30 persons in here, and all of us are not the same. Not because the opposition leader sits in the chair and he is recognized as the opposition leader, duly appointed by the Queen, but that will change on the 30th. I am saying that all of us are different because we are made different. We have different opinions. That is why I make up stay in Parliament and speak for a whole hour and a half about the Leaf to Oyeko. I wouldn't do that now, because it's interesting to me. And that's why my good friend from Christchurch East will talk about law and drafting legislation, because that interests him. And my good friend from St. Peter will bring us back to a religious landing. Well, that's what everybody has their own thing. And I don't think that there's nobody whose tongue is as sharp and witty as the Member of Parliament for St. James Central. But all of us have our own diversity. And that is what made Parliament the sustainable, developed Parliament. That is what made Parliament and give it the ability to stay the test of time. But, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I want to belabor the House. And I just want to close by saying that, when persons hear the word progression, difference, change, they start to get frightened, antsy-pantsy, and tremble, and all agitated. I am saying change is a part of life. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, you don't like saying that, as how you have look when you were 10 years old. I'm sure about that. You have changed. Maybe some people may call it metamorphosed. I don't know. You have. I'm saying is that change is a constant, and we have to accept it, whether physically, whether psychologically. It is one of the constants that we cannot get rid of. And we have to understand that in the evolving society, years ago we never walk around with masks, but we are doing it now. So we have to understand that these things will happen. We have to accept change as it evolves, and we have to govern in the present time. We can't be a 21st century government living in 16th century time. That type of anachronistic behavior cannot be the fit for modern day society. And in modern day society, there are all types of people who must be respected. And I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, as I close, that progress, and that's what we are trying to achieve. We are trying to align ourselves to have an international voice and an international physiology. That's what we are trying to do. But the only way that we can do that is if we have progress. And I want to close by saying that progress is impossible without change. Progress is impossible without change. And those who cannot change their minds, I can go back very slowly. Progress is impossible without change. And those who cannot change their minds, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, will never change anything. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be very brief this evening because I know the hour is ahead of us. But I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that there comes a time in the life of every parliament when it must make consequential decisions to elevate the status of nationhood. And Mr. Speaker, tonight is no exception. No exception because there were persons before us who perhaps would have wanted to go the route that we're going. But for whatever reasons, Mr. Speaker, they never got there. But tonight, I am happy to be part of a team, part as a member of Parliament, witnessing what others would have wanted for Barbados who would have served in this very august chamber. But we've come here today after careful reflection of our past to commit to certain objects, and in this case, the Charter of Barbados. The Constitution first proclaimed for independence in the Caribbean was that of Jamaica. I believe it was in August 6, 1962. The second that was proclaimed, Constitution that is, was Trinidad and Tobago in August of 1962. And that Constitution was replaced in 1976 when Trinidad became a republic. We all know back in 1966 as well, May, Guyana unveiled its independence constitution, later replacing that in 1980 to become the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. And Barbados, having obtained independence in November 30th, 1966, some 54 years later, we are now on a path, like I said earlier, that others who served here in this august chamber would have liked to have gone. But we have made the decision that we are going in that direction. And for the past 54 years, we have been operating as a sovereign state. We have been, since attaining independence from the United Kingdom of Great Britain, we have successfully managed our own affairs. We've never defaulted on debt, defaulted on our international payments, so that the change that obtained back in 1966 was a change from dependence to independence, Mr. Speaker. And if you have a situation where you're changing from dependence to independence all the way back in 1966, and for the organs of the state to have so managed our affairs in Barbados that we practice responsible government. And I want to make the point that Barbados as a sovereign state practiced responsible government since 1966. The government assumed full responsibility from the British, and we have managed well. But I don't recall, and I'm not a lawyer, that the Barbados Constitution making any reference to a referendum for its reform. However, and I went back and I checked some parliamentary debates. And in 1974, the Barbados Constitutional Amendment, that famous debate, the then leader of the Barbados Labour Party opposition, JMG, is referred to him, Tom Adams, said that the government should have set up a constitutional commission to hear and receive evidence and make recommendations for what, if any, amendments were necessary or appropriate to the Constitution. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, shortly after Tom Adams wrested power from Arabara, now the right excellent Arabara, in 1976, the new Barbados Labour Party government, in 1997, set up a Constitution Review Commission chaired by Sir Menzies Cox. And Sir Menzies Cox was asked to make recommendations for constitutional reform. The Constitutional Review Committee submitted its report in 1979. It was passed in the Barbados Parliament in 1981, and which gave effect to some of the recommendations made by the Menzies Cox Commission, including, Mr. Speaker, the establishment of an independent electoral and boundaries commission, which was not brought into existence until, I believe it was 1985. We also had, Mr. Speaker, the Ford Commission. And the Ford Commission traveled all across Barbados to seek the views of Barbadians. And they listened, and the Ford Commission also made recommendations, indeed several recommendations, Mr. Speaker, to the Parliament. But we've always had organs of state. We've had the head of state, we've had the Parliament, Mr. Speaker, we have government in the form of the cabinet as we understand it, and we have, Mr. Speaker, the opposition. The same organs, Mr. Speaker, that exist today will exist after November 30th, when the country becomes a republic. And that is a fact. But, Mr. Speaker, there was a lot of discussion surrounding certain areas of the charter. But I want to make, before I go there, Mr. Speaker, I want to go back. The Barbados Labour Party was founded on March 31st, 1938. I believe I have it right. The Honourable Member for St. Thomas will correct me if I got it wrong. 83 years ago. And at every annual conference of the Barbados Labour Party, there's a church service, and members of the Barbados Labour Party know this. Every Founders Day, sir, Mr. Speaker, Founders Day service, we have a church service, Mr. Speaker, and members of the Barbados Labour Party go into the house of the Lord, and they praise Him. And you know what they also do, Mr. Speaker? They sing that wonderful hymn, the battle hymn of the Republic, Mr. Speaker. And almost every Barbados Labour Party event, that song, as we know it, almost like our anthem within the Labour Party, we sing it, and we sing it lustily. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm making the point that on every significant event that we have, we invoke God's guidance and God's grace to take us forward. And that strong spiritual crusade remains the Barbados Labour Party's way. It started, Mr. Speaker, all the way back when we had our founding leader, Sir Grantley Adams, now the right excellent Sir Grantley Adams. We had it all the way through to his son Tom Adams, through to Sir Harold Bernard St. John. We had it all the way through to Henry Ford, later Sir Henry Ford. We had it all the way through to Professor, the Right Honourable Owen Arthur. And we have it all the way through to Prime Minister Mayor Amor Montley. In fact, Mr. Speaker, for those who don't know, even when we are attending the parliamentary party, God's good guidance and grace is invoked in the name of prayer. So I want to let it be known that there exists a tradition within the Barbados Labour Party and certainly within the government of Barbados that when we go to attend to the people's business, we put God first. And this party, Mr. Speaker, is 83 years old. And I believe it is one of the oldest parties to be found in the hemisphere. And that is a fact, Mr. Speaker. And a party that has done so much for Barbados, that on several occasions had to wrestle Barbados from the clutches of economic doom and failure, Mr. Speaker, because I don't know if a lot of the Barbados Labour Party, sometimes it seems as though it's a lot of Barbados that you have to come and repair stuff. But we've had to do that, Mr. Speaker. So the point is that our spiritual connection has never been challenged. And as we go to the charter, what is so fundamental at Article 2? It says, everyone in Barbados, I quote Mr. Speaker from the charter that is already a document of the House. Everyone in Barbados has a duty to care for each other and to ensure that our relationships are at times characterized by courtesy, civility, and mutual respect. Remain conscious that every generation is indebted to those generations that preceded it and is morally obligated to the one that follows, Mr. Speaker. And what have we done? We, the Barbados Labour Party, took up a government in 2018 when hope was lost in this country. And the Barbados Labour Party restored hope in a short time. Yes, we were faced with a pandemic, and yes, we were challenged. But we did not surrender, Mr. Speaker. What we did in our quest for equitable development, as noted on page 7 of the Charter, it said our progress shall be defined by our duty of care to one another, which recognizes economic enfranchisement, access to food and nutritional security, affordable and efficient public transport, water, sanitation, and it goes on to say universal quality education, quality health care, Mr. Speaker. And what have we done? In terms of reliable transport, we have now in Barbados the most expansive fleet of electric buses to be found anywhere in the Caribbean, Mr. Speaker. And we have done so at a time during a pandemic. But we did so because we recognized that a former government never invested in public transport, racked up almost $1 billion in losses during their term, and at a time when money was difficult, we found the money in the Barbados Labour Party to ensure that there was equitable development, that people who wanted to go get home from work could do so who didn't have a car, Mr. Speaker. And we have led the way in the Caribbean with the electrification of buses, Mr. Speaker. And we are going further because we know that we have to make good and we have to improve the lot of the people of Barbados, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it was not only the electric buses, but we did something that we were forced to do. I recall that for 10 years before we were in office, there were significant challenges of water in St. John and St. Joseph, Mr. Speaker. People can get water. And in St. Thomas, I'm told. And they could not get water. Mr. Speaker, a new government coming to office decided that it would have a water augmentation program. Set up the vineyard augmentation program, Mr. Speaker. And you know what is the result today? That if you are living in the highest point in St. Joseph, Cotton Tower, for example, or Chimborazo, you have water flowing through the taps. Nobody didn't have to go down to the BW headquarters at March like the Barbados Labour Party did when they were in opposition to press the then government for water for the residents. We did that, Mr. Speaker. And we did it during a time when people thought all hope was lost. And if perhaps, Mr. Speaker, if it sounds as though it is a recital, it is absolutely necessary to remind the public that this great political party has at its core a better life for our people, Mr. Speaker. So that this charter, Mr. Speaker, represents what we believe in the Barbados Labour Party, a better quality of life for our people, Mr. Speaker. And the references that I've made, Mr. Speaker, and I will continue to make some more, speaks to what we believe in as a party, Mr. Speaker. How could somebody get up every morning and don't have, Mr. Speaker, the necessary development infrastructure and expect us to continue in that light? So that, Mr. Speaker, this government, even during a pandemic, Mr. Speaker, even during a pandemic, sir, found the money to ensure that we replace water tanks in Barbados. We had a situation that we had some water tanks that could not withstand a Category 3 hurricane. We came to office, we fixed that. We have water tanks now that can withstand a Category 3 hurricane, Mr. Speaker. But we went further. We decided that we were going to build out the water infrastructure. And we have to change several mains across Barbados in order to ensure that the people have water going to their taps. And that is something that we were faced with. We came to office with an infrastructural deficit that we are repairing. And why am I referencing these points? I am referencing these points because those points speak to what we are talking about in this charter. It talks about respect, but it also talks about equitable development, and it talks about a government committing to give of its time and its resources to a people to improve our will and our standing. But, Mr. Speaker, I can go on and on. I can go on and I can make the point that even during, Mr. Speaker, a pandemic, we are still reconstructing, we are still milling, and we are still paving roads in Barbados during a pandemic. So that when people ask where they want to see that they're borrowing money or we have money and where is it going, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, tell them that we have a commitment. Look around Barbados and we will see where we are spending the money. And it has to do with the fact that we have to build out. So, effectively, our charter is about telling a country what is it that we believe in. A charter is about telling a country, this is what we want for you. A charter is about providing a framework for all of us to follow, having recognized where we've come from, Mr. Speaker. So that, Mr. Speaker, I said I was going to be brief, and I know that always late. I really want to commend the government. And I want to say that it is a wonderful but a fortunate thing for me as a member representing the constituents of St. Michael West Central to have the honor in their name to stand before them on television and to stand here in this honorable chamber to be part of such a significant development in Barbados. And to say, in fact, Mr. Speaker, this is a watershed development. This is a watershed event for Barbados. An opportunity for us to sit back and to say to ourselves, for the past almost 54 years, we as a people, recognizing those who served before us, recognizing that there were people who worked hard in this country before us, recognizing that there are those of us who are here today, recognizing, as the charter notes, that those who will come after us will also have an obligation to build upon the work that our foreparents and those who came before us did to help build up Barbados. Mr. Speaker, it is a wonderful thing to be part of a government that has decided to take that bold step. Like I said, Jamaica and Trinidad and Guyana and others took the bold step before us. We took our time, but our time is now, Mr. Speaker. And I ask every Barbadian to recognize the value of our destiny, to understand what it is and what brought us to this point, and to recognize what is required to take us from this point forward. Mr. Speaker, to the constituents of St. Michael West Central, I say to you, you have nothing to be afraid of. It is but another progressive step in our pathways to success, Mr. Speaker. And I am sure that when the historians write the history of Barbados, the Barbados Labour Party government, this Barbados Labour Party government, that took the bold and imaginative step to advance the cause of this country by producing a charter and at last taking the necessary step to ensure that we continue to manage our affairs, that they will have a lot to say, not only about this parliament, but about the people who supported the members in advancing this agenda. To you, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me, first of all, thank all honourable members who have spoken in this debate. I believe that this is a very significant moment in the history of certainly this Parliament and certainly in the history of Barbados. And I am certainly honoured to share in this moment with my colleagues, including the Leader of the Honourable Opposition as well. I want to first of all also thank the Republican Status Transition Advisory Committee, in particular Reverend John Rogers and Sharida Granham, who is the chair of the Subcommittee on Fundamental Principles, Rights and Freedoms. I want to thank them, Mr. Speaker, because while it may seem like a small task that they were given, I believe that what they have demonstrated by the number of consultations that took place and certainly the end result of the hard work that has come out of it, I really do feel that they have taken this task seriously, and as a result, we have a document that I believe all Barbadians can now be proud of. I also want to thank them for speaking to the parliamentary group, and I think that this is particularly important because as a parliamentary group, just like the citizens of this country, sometimes you don't always see eye to eye on everything. Sometimes you have differences of opinions. And I believe that the clarity that was brought certainly from our conversation with both individuals in relation to the series of consultations, in relation to what actually went into the document, helped certainly members of the parliamentary group to be even more sure-footed as it relates to this particular document and what the impact is likely to be. I also want to mention the Honourable Prime Minister. I believe that as history will reflect in Barbados that the Honourable Leader of this great party certainly has exhibited not only visionary leadership, but she has also been able to place Barbados on even footing on the global stage and certainly restore Barbados's position in terms of how people perceive Barbados and how people want to come to Barbados as well. I think that sometimes we do not often understand what is happening at a particular point in our history. And I'm sure that the moments that would have gone before us in relation to the late Sir Grantley and certainly the late Sir Errol Walton Barrow as well, must have been moments as well where not everybody was on the same page with them either as they went on their journey towards independence and certainly opening up the opportunity for us to have the right to vote. History will reflect that there's never a consensus on a lot of issues that are going to be transformational, and I don't think that this is any different. I think, though, that what is the common thread when we look back on all of this is that governments have had to do, and certainly leaders of our parties, respective parties, have had to do things that were visionary and that they believed as well were going to redound to the benefit of all Barbadians, regardless of their class, regardless of their sex, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of their gender, regardless of their sexual orientation. And I believe that this document has now, for the first time, perhaps encapsulated a lot of what not only older Barbadians feel, but also a lot of younger Barbadians feel about the type of society in which we would want to live. Now, a lot of this debate has been about two concerns that have been raised in the public domain within the last few days. I believe it is regrettable that so much has been focused on, in one instance, the word creator being the reference to God, and certainly the other reference to sexuality, certainly, in the document. I think it is unfortunate, sir, because there are so many other things that this document represents. Certainly for me, I am not only of a lineage that would have had persons enslaved coming across the Atlantic from Africa, but I'm also the product of a generation of persons who were affected and who were brought to Barbados as indentured servants, who are known commonly to Barbados as the red legs of Barbados. And so for me, just the embodiment in this document of a recognition of those persons who made their way across the Atlantic and also who were part of that enslavement period and who made Barbados their home and whose culture as well is certainly part of my own culture. I feel particularly tied to this document because there is a recognition of those people who were forcibly brought here, but also those people who contributed to the development of our society. And in turn, being a product of both sides of the equation, I feel equally tied to this document that for the first time we actually recognize the contributions of those persons and the journey that those persons would have made back in those years when, obviously, because of the color of your skin, you were discriminated against. And I believe that for me draws me closer to it, and I'm sure that for others who have felt, the generations of oppression, I believe that also will draw them as well close to this particular document. Mr. Speaker, I recall several years before this administration took up office that a document was produced with the input of several members of the Barbados Labour Party, a document called the Covenant of Hope. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, if he takes his mind back, would recall that his signature was affixed to that document, and I'm always quick to remind him of the fact that he, like all of the rest of us, understood some basic principles that were necessary if we were to transform Barbadian society, transform the Barbadian economy. And there were certain things that we had to do because we all understood at that time that we could not leave Barbados in the same position that we found it. That what we had to do, building on the backs of our forefathers, is that we had to leave Barbados better than what we came and we found. And we signed that document. I don't know if the Honourable Member forgets that from time to time because I am almost sure, I don't want to accuse him of any plagiarism with his document that he's referred to for his political party. But it's just ironic that coming on the heels of the Barbados Labour Party's Covenant of Hope, the Honourable Member, as he then was an Honourable Member with us as well, would have left the party and decided that he would also then introduce his own document, which is no doubt a reflection of some of those guiding principles that were embodied in that document. I feel it necessary to mention that, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, when I look at the principles that were laid out in that document, many of them are in many ways reflected in this particular charter as well. But one of the principles that is highlighted, which the Honourable Member made reference to in terms of his own document, is a principle which refers to the fact that the onus was on us to foster civility, inclusiveness, and respect for diversity amongst our citizens. It also speaks, Mr. Speaker, to our politics being less personal and more inspirational, which, as the Honourable Prime Minister said today, that is what this Charter of Barbados is about. But it also speaks to our politics that it must continue to reflect that we truly care about people. It doesn't say about people who are Christians. It doesn't say that we must care about people who are Barbados Labour Party people. It doesn't say that we have to care about straight people. It doesn't say that we have to care about black people or brown people. It says that we must truly care about our people. It also says, Mr. Speaker, that our politics must be guided by the underlying belief that every citizen matters and deserves the right to become the best that they can be. Mr. Speaker, I stand here this evening, again reflective that all of us signed on to those basic principles that were to guide us on coming to office. Those were the things that as we went in our people's assemblies and across the length and breadth of Barbados, that citizens of Barbados told us that they wanted of a Barbados Labour Party administration. And that is what we signed on to. That was the understanding that we signed on to. So I stand proudly here today knowing that not only did we give our commitment through a covenant of hope to the people of this country, not only that we signed a document indicating our seriousness and our commitment to executing those things that we believed at that time to be right, but also that I can proudly be part of a government that has not backed down from its position to do the right thing, sir. And I remember the Honourable Member, I don't know if I've even ever shared this with him, but I recall canvassing in his constituency. This is the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. And there was a gentleman, a young man, who preferred to be referred to as female. And basically he indicated to me that he did not think that he would vote because he never felt as though either his representative at the time, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, or government generally could relate to him and in any way reflected for him the Barbados that he wanted to live in. In other words, he did not believe that his fundamental rights and freedoms as a human being were being reflected in any way by what governments were doing. And sir, as I read this document, and certainly as I discussed with my colleagues certainly last night and over the last few days, the concerns that have been raised, I remember that young man. And I believe that I have a responsibility to not only the people in my constituency who may have a different way of life or have a different sexual persuasion, but to anybody who is different, to make sure that I protect their fundamental rights and freedoms for them to be able to choose. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think that we have been able to at least start a conversation in this country that allows us to now also teach our young people about being tolerant. And you've heard speaker after speaker this evening speak about, their own experiences. And the truth of the matter is that in many cases, we have a lot of prejudices that have been borne out because of the experiences that we've had as a result of slavery, and also because of, in many cases, a lot of anger, a lot of pent-up anger. But we also have it as a result of not understanding that all of us are created equal, but equally all of us are not the same. And therefore, if, as many people who want to quote from the Bible, when it is convenient to do so, will do, I have always been brought up on basic principles. I don't go to church every single Sunday. But what I do recall from all of my days of going to church is that I understood that you judge not lest you be judged. And I also understood that you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And those two principles for me are the things that guide me. I treat to people as people treat to me. but I also do unto others as I would have them do unto me. And I therefore believe that if it isn't good enough for anybody to discriminate against me, it is not good enough for me to discriminate against anyone, regardless of whether I agree with whatever they are doing. But you know, I would love that this debate could take us to a place where we also look at the fact that this charter also speaks to the creature called the common entrance examination, for instance, because it speaks to the fact that you don't judge people on their educational background, where they have gone to school, but you now look at people on the basis of what they have achieved, what they have accomplished. That's what this charter also speaks about. It gives us even firmer footing on which to start to make the transformation that is necessary in this country, to be able to allow our young people to not only be the best that they can be, but actually not feel as though they have to go to a particular school in order to accomplish or achieve a certain level within our society. That's what this document is talking about. And therefore, a lot of the things that we have actually started to do which are transformational in this country in the last 3 years, many of the things are embodied as the springboard for us to be able to do it. It is also the springboard upon which we must now be able to teach our young people as well about their history, about what matters in life, about what Barbadians should stand for, what Barbadians should fight for, and what a Barbadian society must look like for future generations. That's what this document teaches us. I'm excited, Mr. Speaker, because for me, I believe that, you know, as a former history student, I believe that you have to know where you have come from in order to know where you are going. And if we don't take the opportunity to even do things like revise our curriculum, which we started to do, our history curriculum in particular, then we end up with a generation that doesn't understand where it has come from. And I'm happy to say that come September of next year, all students will have the introduction from the primary school into the history syllabus, and no doubt that this document will form a part, as the Charter of Barbados, will form a part of our history lessons and a firm foundation for many of our students to understand our ancestors and understand their contribution, understand where we have come from, but also understand where they are going as well. I want, Mr. Speaker, in thanking all who have spoken as well, to remind everyone who is listening. You know, sometimes we talk about world leaders. We look outside and we say that we are very proud of people who have fought for civil rights across the world. We talk about Martin Luther, we talk about Nelson Mandela. And I've had to say this before, not in this place, but certainly in Parliament, that on reflection on the life of Nelson Mandela, for instance, from South Africa, one of the interesting things is that after he had been through all that he had been through in relation to apartheid, when he had the opportunity to lead South Africa, he made sure that there were no forms of discrimination left on the statute books of South Africa. And he did so because there was an understanding that having been a part of a process of oppression, there was no form of discrimination that could be tolerated in the South African society going forward. And sir, I want to read to this House and read into the record one of the quotes from Nelson Mandela. He said, "I knew, as well as I knew anything, that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He's locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. I am not truly free if I am taking away someone else's freedom, just as surely as I am not free when my freedom is taken from me. The oppressor and the oppressed alike are robbed of their humanity." And this is the important part, sir. To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedoms of others. Mr. Speaker, this Barbados Labour Party administration, I believe through this Charter of Barbados, understands what those who have come before us have fought for, what people like Nelson Mandela, who has been a global leader in the civil rights movement, what this means to Barbados and what is the right thing for us as a people to do. For those who are fearful of the concerns that have been raised, I say to you simply, for the church, the main question that has to be asked is, why is it that so many young people seem so disconnected from the church? Why is it that so many people are so disconnected, in many cases, from hardcore religion? I ask that question, not that they don't believe in God, not that they don't believe in a creator, but it is a serious question we must ask ourselves, and a lot has been done to erode the relationship with our young people and God, and to instill in them a sense of spirituality, a sense of faith, a sense of hope as well. Instead of being concerned of who is included and what rights are covered, perhaps we need to ask ourselves some serious questions about where it has all broken down. Why does this younger generation believe that we must be more tolerant than those who came before us? Why does this generation, knowing its history, understand that the church has also been used and religion has been used to oppress our people? And therefore, there are questions that our young people ask that many people do not answer, Mr. Speaker. And that is what confuses them. Sometimes they're going to certain churches, they don't understand what is being said, they cannot relate to it. Sometimes we forget the fact that, the tradition has been that you must have Sunday clothes in order to go to church, in order to be saved by the word of God. And that turns off our young people and our vulnerable people who may not have the Sunday clothes to go to church because they got 6 children and they don't have all the shoes and the Sunday go-to-meeting clothes in order to put on their back, sir. And I say to you that the church has an important role to play in our society. Faith has an important role to play in our society. Spirituality has an important role to play in our society. And for those who believe that we are going to get rid of prayer in the schools, prayers are said in schools still. But we also respect that people have a right to choose, and we can't force people, if they have a different faith, to do the things because the majority are doing them. But what we must teach are the biblical principles, the things that I've spoken about, making sure that you do unto others as you will have them do unto you. Making sure that you are guided by the love and the respect for each other, that you honor your father and your mother. I don't have to go to church every Sunday to preach it, because I know it, because it has been ingrained in me. And we can teach morality. We can teach these principles as well by making sure that children have an understanding of the Bible, of the Quran, of all of these things. But what we mustn't do is to make it appear as though one religion must be held up higher than the other. Because the truth of the matter, sir, I believe I'm a better person because I've been open-minded enough to not to believe what I believe, but also to be open-minded enough to understand other religions and to respect what other people believe as well, or what other faiths people may have in our society as well. That is what has made me well-rounded. For all the people who prayed for me when I was sick, they prayed from every single religion, and I took all the prayers. Because whoever they prayed to God, they prayed to Allah, they prayed to Haile Selassie, I took them. And I'm here today, whichever creator it was, sir. Because I respect what people believe, and I'm not trying to shove anything down anybody's throat. So long as they ain't trying to kill nobody, rape nobody, commit any crime, then we have to respect people. And when we try to make it appear as though we're trying to slip in something through the back door, it is wrong. You know, what I don't understand is that the impression is being given that for some reason we haven't thought this through, that we are trying to get people who are of same sex to get married. And we're trying to make sure that we slip this in now so that we can put it within the Constitution. Even though we have said that the Charter is a separate document from the Constitution, and there will be extensive consultation in relation to the Constitution. Even though we have said that Barbados has already recognized that we are not supposed to discriminate against any person, regardless of their gender, regardless of their sexual orientation. We recognize that. We've signed on to all kinds of international agreements to that effect. And we recognize that we are not to be doing those things, sir. So to make it seem as though now we are eroding the biblical principles and we are taking away God from our society, and that the Barbados Labour Party and this administration has now dismissed that we believe, like all other Barbadians, that God is a Bajan, that our Creator is a Bajan, that every time that we have a hurricane coming, that we pray to the Father, the Creator, the Lord, the Savior, to deliver us and to save us. And so far, the Lord has been the people's guide for more than 400 years, sir. That is who we are. That is who we are. But we are a people that also ask questions. And because we've been educated, we can't just believe, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch East indicated. I remember growing up and hearing that black people were cursed. That the Bible said that black people were cursed from the land of Canaan. Huh? Think about it. That's what we were told. But as we get older, we realize we're not cursed. We are blessed. And we also come to realize that those who have oppressed us, perhaps they know better. And therefore, we have to do better because we know better. And that is why it is so important to teach our history. That is why it is so important to be open, sir. It is also important to be open because you don't know what child you may bring into this world and what sexual orientation they may have. You don't know whether they're going to have some disability, sir. You don't know. You don't know if your cousin, your sister, your aunt, whoever it is, decides that they want to live a different lifestyle. Are we saying that we are now going to be the judge of our people? That we are going to condemn our people in such a way that people don't feel that they can give of their best to our country and to our society? That's not the church that I know. That's not the God that I know. My God is a forgiving God, sir. My God is a forgiving God. And as one other member said, you know, it's funny how we are so quick to judge others and to condemn others, but we are quick to take their money regardless of what they may do or what they may say, sir. It is unfortunate.
Y'all want to go home here tonight?
It is unfortunate, sir. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition can get uptight. As I have told him, everybody who knows certain things is not dead. And I will not stand here, sir, and be a hypocrite. I will also not condone hypocrisy. Okay? He made sure he recited all of the incidences within our society where we have suspected people to not be straight in our society, sir. The Honourable Member spoke to those references. But the question I have is, have we not had some of our best and our brightest people in this country leading us, giving their heart and their soul to this country, who were of different sexual orientations? Some in the closet, some out bold. But what have we done? We've tried to oppress people. We've tried to make people feel as though they can't come out and be themselves. It is wrong, sir. And in a 2021 Barbados, you got to call it out for what it is. Nobody is stopping you from believing what you believe. But what we are saying to you all is that that is not the Barbados that we want to live in. We must respect other people. And we must respect that everybody has a contribution to make to this country, whether we like it or not. That's what this Charter of Barbados is about, sir. It is about making sure that when we talk about being global citizens, that we understand that to be global, you can't be myopic. You can't be judgmental. You cannot do to others as you wouldn't have them do to you. That's what this charter is about. This charter is about saying to the rest of the world that it don't matter that your history enslaved us. It doesn't matter that your history oppressed us. It doesn't matter that you took away our drums. It doesn't matter that you took away our religion and our spirituality. We know right from wrong. And we know that we must not carry the burden of the anger of the oppressed. but instead we must be the unifying force, not only for Barbados, for the region and the rest of the world, sir. That is what the Charter of Barbados is about. It is our springboard to what we teach to the generations to come, and the Barbados, certainly that way. I am old and gray, sir. I want to live in, because we have set the tone for what is the right thing to do, sir. I am not going to skirt around issues, sir, because, you know, I have come up in the community of Brandons. I have come up in a community that I represent, where I understand fears. I understand that fears are real. I also understand that ignorance is real as well, sir. And sometimes it is only when people are exposed and when people understand, you know, that the society is bigger than them, that they start to open their minds and their hearts to wisdom, sir. And I hope that this is a turning point for Barbados, you know, and in our history, where we can actually now start a conversation about really who we are and what we stand for and what we are prepared to fight for. And I feel that every person, certainly in the Barbados Labour Party administration, is prepared to fight for the rights and the fundamental freedoms of our people. We have fought from the days of Sir Grantley for the right for people to vote. We have fought to make sure that the people who came out of the plantation had the right to be able to purchase plantation lands. We have fought to make sure that we have empowered our people through entrepreneurship, sir. We have tried to build out this economy and our society over the years to take people from where they were to where they need to be. But there comes a time, as we are on the eve of becoming a republic as well, that we also have to do some introspection and ask ourselves whether what we have done before is what must guide us going forward. So, sir, I really appreciate the fact that this document is aspirational. It does not reflect in any way that we are going to take out something and we're going to change our laws all of a sudden. But this is a journey. And on a journey, sometimes you're not going to get consensus all the time. And you're going to have to change direction sometimes, sir. But you are on a journey and you know the direction in which you want to go. And I hope that the public of Barbados takes the opportunity to read the document, to understand the document, to dismiss some of the noise, because a lot of the noise is artificial. I know we're getting into a silly season where people are trying to attribute things to this administration, to which this administration's hands are clean on. Okay, we have members, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch said, that have drafted legislation to empower our people, to give people basic fundamental rights and freedoms, sir. That is a party that I know. The Honourable Member for St. Thomas is the greatest freedom fighter that we have in the Barbados Labour Party. Fight for everybody's rights. That is the party that I know, sir. That is the party in whose bosom I want to remain in for life. Because I understand what this party has also been built on and what we have a responsibility to continue to shoulder if we are to shape the society in which we live in. And sir, I therefore want to commend this resolution and ask that this resolution do now pass.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution do not pass. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no.
No.
Me think the ayes have it.
Divide, sir.
Normally the opposition is calling for division.
Put the question again. Put the question again.
The question is where to put, so do the call. It's called for divide.
Yeah, but you don't put the question again. And I call the names. The question is?
The question is that this resolution stand passed. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no.
No.
You have the
When
ayes.
you say that, I'll then call the names.
Right, do the roll call, please.
Ms. Bradshaw,
Agreed.
Mr. Marshall,
Aye.
Ms. Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Simmons,
Aye.
Dr. Duguid,
Aye.
Mr. Sutherland,
Aye.
Mr. Griffith,
Aye.
His Honor, Mr. Neil
Aye.
Jubro, Bishop Adderley.
No.
Oh, right, okay. Mr. Hinkson, Mr. Abrams,
Aye.
Mr. Phillips,
Aye.
Mr. Strawn,
Yes.
Mr. Jordan,
Aye.
Mr. King,
Aye.
you got Humphrey, nine. Mr. Gooding-Dadgel,
Aye.
Mr. Toppin, Mr. Ford, Mr. Thorne, Mr. Humphrey.
Aye.
Sir, 20 honorable members voted aye, 1 honorable man voted no.
In accordance with the division, 20 members voted aye, 1 voted no. This resolution stands passed. Honourable member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair. Neil. Kerry, can I have it, please?
She's gone. Right there.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill on recommitment.
Question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This house is now in committee.
Chair, fairly late in the process, it was discovered that there was an omission of a single word at clause 3, and I therefore ask if the question can be put again on recommitment.
Yes, it may. Question.
When you put it, move it. When you put it.
The clauses.
Madam Chair, as I recollect quite well, when the question is put, I would then indicate to the chamber that we want to make an amendment to that particular clause and then beg to move that it pass with the amendment.
You're right. Which one? We're at clause 3? Beverly. Call it.
Madam Chair, clause 3.
Madam Chair, I beg to move a small amendment to clause 3. I beg to move a small amendment to clause 3. In clause 3, which deals with the amendment of section 4, section 4.2 reads, the award may be conferred annually on either Independence Day, National Heroes Day, or both such days. The word on is missing before both. So I want to move an amendment to insert the word on before the phrase both such days. I beg to move that clause 3 stand part. Clause 3 is amended, stand part.
Question is that clause 3 stand part with amendment. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Beg to move, Madam Chair, that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee with an amendment.
Seconder. Question is that I do not report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee with amendment. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committee is reporting the passing of one bill with amendments in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Gold Award of Achievement Amendment Act 2021.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to give notice of receipt of the report of the Joint Select Committee on the National Vending Bill 2021. And I beg your pardon, sir. I beg to delay the report of the Joint Select Committee on National Vending Bill 2021.
Beg second.
Question is that the aforementioned report be laid in this honourable chamber. Okay.
Notice is recommitted. Notice.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to give notice of a resolution with respect to the report of the National the Joint Select Committee on the National Vending Bill. The resolution is, be it resolved that this Honourable House approve the report on the Joint Select Committee on the National Vending Bill 2021, laid in the Honourable House of Assembly on the 23rd of November 2021.
Beg second.
Government business recommitted.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until December 3rd, Friday, December 3rd at 10 a.m.
The question is that this Honourable Chamber be adjourned until Friday, the 3rd day of December at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands adjourned until Friday, the 3rd day of December at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.